Delivery girl found Hell's Angel shot, and holding his twins, what she did next stunned everyone. The evening air hung heavy with the promise of rain as Ellie Thompson checked her phone one last time. The delivery app showed just one remaining package for the night, a small brown box addressed to 1247 Maple Street. She'd never been to that part of town before, and the unfamiliar address made her slightly uneasy. Just one more, she whispered to herself, adjusting the rearview mirror of her beat-up Honda Civic. The dashboard clock read 9:47 p.m. Her shoulders ached from a long day of lifting packages, and her feet burned inside her worn sneakers. Ellie pulled up the map on her phone, squinting at the blue line that would guide her to her final destination. The route led away from the busy main streets she knew well, winding into a quieter residential area where the streetlights seemed fewer and farther between. As she drove, the familiar sounds of the city faded away. Here, the houses sat further apart, their windows dark except for the occasional porch light. Tall oak trees lined the street, their branches casting strange shadows in her headlights. "Come on, where are you?" Ellie muttered, scanning the house numbers. The streets were empty, no cars, no pedestrians, not even a stray cat. Just darkness and silence. Something caught her eye ahead, a dark shape on the sidewalk. At first she thought it might be a garbage bag someone had left out, but as her headlights swept across it, her breath caught in her throat. It was a person lying motionless on the ground. Ellie's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Her first instinct was to keep driving. She'd seen enough crime shows to know better than to stop. But then she noticed something else that made her stomach lurch. There was blood on the sidewalk, visible even in the dim light. "Oh, God," she whispered, pulling over to the curb. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she reached for her phone. Through the windshield she could see the figure more clearly now, a man in a leather jacket sprawled on his side. With trembling fingers she dialed 911, ready to report what she'd found. But as she opened her car door, she heard something that made her freeze. A small whimper, like the sound of a frightened child. Ellie moved closer, her phone ready to call for help. The man was huge, his leather jacket adorned with patches, the unmistakable insignia of the Hells Angels motorcycle club clearly visible. But what made her gasp wasn't his appearance, or even the blood seeping through his shirt. It was what he held against his chest. 2 small children, twins by the look of them, no more than 3 years old. The biker's eyes were half closed, his breathing labored. The children, a boy and a girl, were awake but eerily quiet, clinging to the man's jacket with tiny fists. They looked up at Ellie with wide, frightened eyes. "Hello? 911? I need help right away," Ellie said into her phone, her voice shaking. She knelt beside the man, careful not to startle the children. "I'm on Maple Street near house number 1247. There's a man who's been shot, and he has 2 small children with him. Please hurry." The operator's voice crackled through the phone, asking for more details, but Ellie's attention was fixed on the scene before her. The man's eyes flickered open, focusing on her face with surprising intensity despite his obvious pain. Blood had soaked through his shirt, spreading across the concrete beneath him. But still, he kept his arms wrapped protectively around the children. "Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story." The cold night air bit at Ellie's skin as she knelt beside the wounded man. His leather jacket was slick with blood, and his breathing came in short, labored gasps. The streetlight cast harsh shadows across his face, highlighting the pain etched in his features. In her arms, the twins huddled close, their small bodies trembling. "Stay with me," Ellie urged, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. "Help is coming." She shifted the children gently, trying to keep them warm while maintaining pressure on the man's wound with her free hand. The little girl buried her face in Ellie's jacket, while the boy stared at his father with wide, frightened eyes. They couldn't have been more than 3 years old. Their matching brown curls were messy, and their pajamas were spotted with their father's blood. The man's eyes flickered open, focusing on Ellie's face with surprising clarity. His hand reached out, weakly grasping her wrist. "Don't," he started, his voice barely above a whisper. Ellie had to lean in closer to hear him. "Don't let them go into the system." His grip tightened slightly. "Take care of them." Ellie's heart skipped a beat. She glanced down at the twins, then back at their father. I will," she promised, the words tumbling out before she could think them through. Something in his desperate plea touched a deep chord within her. The man's eyes softened with relief. "Eli," he whispered, nodding towards the boy. "Sophie." His gaze moved to the little girl. "They're good kids." His voice grew fainter with each word. "Eli and Sophie," Ellie repeated softly, tightening her embrace around the children. "I'll keep them safe." The man's eyes began to close, his grip on her wrist loosening. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing louder with each passing second. Ellie's heart raced as she watched his chest rise and fall in shallow breaths. Red and blue lights flooded the street as the ambulance pulled up. Paramedics rushed out, their movements quick and practiced. They gently moved Ellie and the twins aside, their voices calm but urgent as they assessed the situation. "Multiple gunshot wounds," one called out. "BP's dropping." Ellie stood back, holding the twins close as they watched the paramedics work. Sophie whimpered softly, and Eli's small hand clutched Ellie's jacket tighter. The paramedics lifted their father onto a stretcher, medical equipment beeping ominously. "Ma'am," one of the paramedics approached her. "Are you related to the victim?" Ellie shook her head, suddenly aware of how strange this all must look. "No, I'm a delivery driver. I found him like this." The paramedic nodded, jotting something down on a clipboard. "And the children?" Ellie looked down at the twins, remembering her promise. Her throat felt tight. She hesitated, the weight of her commitment hitting her full force. "They're with me." The ambulance doors slammed shut, and the vehicle sped away, sirens blaring. Ellie stood rooted to the spot, her mind reeling. The twins pressed against her legs, their small bodies shaking. She had just promised to care for 2 children she didn't know, to keep them from a system she knew nothing about. The rational part of her mind screamed that this was crazy, impossible even. But as she felt their trembling forms against her, she knew she couldn't break her word. The streetlights cast long shadows as Ellie's car wound through the quiet neighborhoods. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white with tension. In her rearview mirror, she could see the twins huddled together in the back seat, their small faces illuminated by passing streetlights. "It's okay," she whispered, more to herself than to them. "We're almost there." Sophie's head rested on her brother's shoulder, both children exhausted from the night's events. Their matching blonde curls were messy, and their clothes were wrinkled. Ellie's mind raced with questions. What would she feed them? Where would they sleep? How could she, someone who could barely make ends meet, take care of 2 small children? Her apartment building came into view, a modest 3-story structure with peeling paint and rusty fire escapes. Ellie parked in her usual spot and turned off the engine. The silence felt heavy. "Okay, little ones," she said softly, turning to face them. "This is where I live. It's not much, but it's warm and safe." The twins looked at her with wide, uncertain eyes. Eli clutched his sister's hand tightly as Ellie helped them out of the car. The stairs creaked under their feet as they climbed to the second floor. Ellie's hands shook slightly as she unlocked her door. Inside, the small one-bedroom apartment felt different somehow. Her usual comfortable mess of delivery receipts and takeout containers suddenly seemed embarrassing. The twins stood close together near the door, taking in their new surroundings. "Are you hungry?" Ellie asked, moving toward her tiny kitchen. She opened her refrigerator, grateful to find some milk and bread. "I can make you some toast?" The children nodded silently. Ellie busied herself with preparing a simple meal, adding some peanut butter to make it more filling. She watched as they ate small bites, sitting close together on her worn couch. "Thank you," Sophie whispered, the first words either of them had spoken since leaving the scene of the shooting. Ellie's heart clenched. She found her softest blanket in the hall closet and draped it over them. The couch wasn't ideal, but it would have to do for tonight. She grabbed an extra pillow from her bed and helped them get comfortable. "I'll be right in there," she said, pointing to her bedroom door. "If you need anything, just call for me, okay?" More silent nods. Ellie left a small lamp on and retreated to her room, leaving the door cracked open. She lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet breathing from the living room. What had she gotten herself into? She was 25, single, working as a delivery driver. Hardly parent material. Her apartment was too small, her income too modest, her life too unstable for children. Yet here she was, with 2 traumatized kids sleeping on her couch, their father fighting for his life in a hospital somewhere. Ellie rolled onto her side, pulling her knees up to her chest. Despite all the logical reasons this was a terrible idea, something deep inside told her she'd made the right choice. Those children needed someone, and for whatever reason, fate had chosen her. "I'll keep them safe," she whispered into the darkness, remembering the desperate look in the man's eyes as he'd made his request. "I promise." Sleep refused to come as her mind continued to race with worries and plans, but underneath it all was a surprising sense of certainty. Whatever happened next, she knew she couldn't abandon these children. Not now. Not ever. The morning sun peeked through the thin curtains of Ellie's small apartment. She blinked awake, hearing soft whimpers from the living room. For a moment, she forgot about the events of the previous night. But reality quickly rushed back. The twins, the injured man, the promise. Sophie's crying grew louder, and Ellie hurried to the living room. There, she found little Eli with his arm around his sister, patting her back like he'd done this many times before. The sight made Ellie's chest tighten. These children, so young, already knew how to comfort each other. "Hey there," Ellie said softly, kneeling beside the couch. "Are you hungry?" Sophie's tears slowed as she looked up at Ellie with big, wet eyes. Eli kept his protective arm around his sister, but gave Ellie a small nod. They needed so much more than the leftover crackers and juice she had given them last night. "Let's get you 2 cleaned up, and then we'll go shopping, okay?" After washing their faces and helping them into the same clothes from yesterday, Ellie grabbed her purse and checked inside. Her last paycheck hadn't been much, but these kids needed everything. She'd figure out the rest later. At the store, Ellie felt completely out of her depth. She pushed a shopping cart with Sophie seated in the child seat, while Eli held on to the side, staying close. Other shoppers gave them curious looks, probably wondering why this young woman in wrinkled clothes was shopping with 2 toddlers early in the morning. "Okay," she mumbled to herself, walking down the aisles. "Diapers first." She grabbed a package, hoping they were the right size. Into the cart went small t-shirts, pants, and tiny socks. She added baby wipes, children's toothbrushes, and gentle soap. In the food section, Ellie carefully selected items she thought children might eat: bread, peanut butter, applesauce, bananas. Sophie pointed at a box of cereal with colorful characters on it, and Ellie couldn't say no. She watched her remaining money dwindle but kept going. These children needed her. When they reached the checkout, Ellie's hands shook as she counted out the last of her cash. The cashier smiled at the twins, who were being remarkably well-behaved. "Your children are adorable," she said. Ellie opened her mouth to correct her but stopped. Instead, she just smiled and thanked her. Back at the apartment, Ellie set up a small play area with some soft blankets on the floor. She changed the twins into clean clothes and watched as they explored their new surroundings. Sophie clutched a stuffed bear Ellie had splurged on, while Eli carefully arranged some toy cars in a neat line. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, Ellie observed them with growing wonder. These children, who had witnessed something terrible just hours ago, were already beginning to trust her. Sophie toddled over and climbed into Ellie's lap, settling there like she belonged. Eli looked up from his cars and gave Ellie a small smile, the first she'd seen from him. In that moment, something shifted inside Ellie. These weren't just two kids she was watching temporarily. They were her responsibility now, her purpose. She wasn't just the delivery girl who happened to be in the right place at the right time anymore. She was their protector, their safe harbor in a storm she didn't fully understand. The morning sun barely peeked through Ellie's apartment windows when she noticed something unusual. A white piece of paper lay on the floor, just inside her front door. Her heart skipped a beat as she walked over, careful not to wake the twins who were still sleeping peacefully on her fold-out couch. With trembling fingers, she picked up the note. The handwriting was messy, almost angry-looking. Her stomach turned as she read the words, "We know where you are. Bring the kids to us, or else." Ellie's hands shook as she crumpled the paper. The morning suddenly felt colder, darker. She looked over at Eli and Sophie, their little chests rising and falling with each breath. Sophie had her thumb in her mouth, while Eli had kicked off his blanket during the night. "No," Ellie whispered to herself, her jaw tightening. "I won't let anyone hurt you." She rushed to check all the windows, making sure they were locked tight. The deadbolt on the front door clicked into place under her shaking hands. Her mind raced. With possibilities. How had they found her? Had someone followed her home? The thought made her skin crawl. Sophie stirred on the couch, her big brown eyes opening slowly. "I'm hungry," she mumbled, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Just a minute, sweetie," Ellie said, trying to keep her voice steady. She didn't want the children to sense her fear. She moved through her small apartment, checking every corner, every possible entry point. The bathroom window was secure, the fire escape empty. Eli woke up too, his little face scrunching up as he stretched. "Can we have pancakes?" he asked hopefully. Ellie's heart ached at his innocent request. Here she was, terrified for their lives, and all they wanted was breakfast. She pulled the curtains closed tight and moved to the kitchen, keeping the twins in her sight at all times. "Sure, we can have pancakes," she said, managing a smile. "But first, let's play a game. We're going to be extra quiet today, okay? Like little mice." The twins nodded eagerly, always ready for a game. Ellie's hands trembled as she reached for her phone. She needed help, real help. The police had to do something, didn't they? The operator's voice was professional, but distant as Ellie explained her situation. "Ma'am, unless there's an immediate threat or evidence of a crime, there's not much we can do. Keep your doors locked and call us if you see anything suspicious." Ellie's hope deflated like a balloon. She thanked the operator and hung up, feeling more alone than ever. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy blanket. These children, these precious, innocent children, were depending on her. And now she knew for certain that dangerous people were looking for them. She watched as the twins played quietly with some stuffed animals she'd bought them yesterday. They seemed so small, so vulnerable. The threat felt more real now, more immediate. But as scared as she was, something deeper was growing inside her, a fierce determination she'd never felt before. "Come on, kids," she said, forcing cheerfulness into her voice. "Let's make those pancakes." As she moved around the kitchen, she kept glancing at the door, at the windows, at every shadow. The morning light couldn't chase away her fears, but it couldn't break her resolve either. She was all these children had right now, and somehow, some way, she would keep them safe. Ellie sat cross-legged on her worn carpet, watching Eli and Sophie stack colorful blocks she'd bought at the dollar store. The afternoon sun filtered through her apartment's thin curtains, casting long shadows across the floor. Her mind wandered to their father, the mysterious Hell's Angel who'd been bleeding on the sidewalk just days ago. The twins seemed so innocent, so removed from the dangerous world their father inhabited. Sophie's blonde curls bounced as she carefully placed another block on their wobbly tower, while Eli's serious expression reminded Ellie of his father's intense gaze. How did a hardened biker end up with two beautiful children, and why was he so desperate to keep them away from the system? The sudden ring of her phone made Ellie jump, causing Sophie to look up with wide eyes. Ellie checked the screen. Unknown number. Her hand trembled as she answered. "Hello? Is this Ellie?" A woman's husky voice came through the line. "I'm Carmen. I need to talk to you about Jake and the twins." Ellie's throat went dry. She moved away from the children, lowering her voice. "How did you get this number?" "That doesn't matter right now," Carmen replied. "What matters is that Jake's alive. He's in critical condition at Memorial Hospital, but he's fighting." There was a pause. "He was one of us, a Hell's Angel, but he was going to turn on the club, testify against some of our highest-ranking members." The pieces started falling into place in Ellie's mind. "That's why they shot him?" "Yes." Carmen's voice softened slightly. "Jake got tired of the life, especially after the twins came along. He collected evidence, made deals with the feds. The club found out and—" She trailed off. Ellie watched as Eli knocked over their tower, blocks scattering across the floor. Sophie giggled, already gathering them up to start again. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you need to understand what you're dealing with." Carmen's tone turned urgent. "These people, they don't forgive, and they don't forget. Jake's testimony could bring down half the chapter. They won't stop until they find those kids." "They're just children," Ellie protested, her voice cracking. "They're leverage," Carmen corrected. "The club thinks if they have the twins, they can control Jake, make sure he stays quiet." She sighed heavily. "Listen carefully. If you want to keep them safe, you need to leave town. The gang won't stop looking for them." Ellie's heart pounded in her chest. "Leave town?" She looked around her small apartment, at the life she'd built for herself. It wasn't much, but it was hers. "I can't just—" "You can, and you should," Carmen cut her off. "I've seen what these people are capable of. They'll find you eventually if you stay." The line went dead, leaving Ellie standing in her kitchen, phone still pressed to her ear. Sophie toddled over, tugging at her pant leg with a block in her hand. Ellie picked her up automatically, holding her close as she watched Eli methodically rebuild their tower. "Run away? Start over somewhere new?" The thought terrified her, but as she held Sophie and looked at Eli, she realized she was more afraid of what might happen if she stayed. These children trusted her, needed her. Their father had trusted her too. The note from this morning flashed in her mind. "We know where you are." Carmen's warning echoed in her thoughts. Maybe running wasn't what she wanted, but it might be exactly what she needed to do to keep her promise. The warm aroma of spaghetti filled Ellie's small kitchen as she stirred the pot of sauce. Steam rose in gentle wisps, carrying the scent of garlic and herbs through the apartment. From the living room came the soft sounds of Eli and Sophie playing with some second-hand toys she'd picked up earlier that day. Ellie glanced over her shoulder, catching sight of the twins. They sat close together on the carpet, sharing a worn teddy bear between them. Every few minutes, their eyes would find her, as if making sure she was still there. Their trust in her was both beautiful and terrifying. "Almost ready, sweethearts," she called out, her voice gentle. Sophie's face lit up with a smile, while Eli hugged the teddy bear closer. The pasta was simple. She couldn't afford anything fancy, but she'd made sure to add extra vegetables to the sauce. The twins needed proper nutrition, and she was determined to give them the best she could manage on her tight budget. As she drained the pasta in the sink, memories of her own childhood bubbled up. Her mother, working multiple jobs, rarely had time to cook. Most nights, young Ellie had eaten microwave dinners alone. Her father's absence had left a hole that never quite filled. Now, standing in her kitchen with 2 children depending on her, she felt a fierce determination to do better. "Time to eat," she announced, setting 3 plates on the small kitchen table. The twins scrambled to their feet, tiny hands reaching for the chairs. Ellie lifted them one at a time, settling them into their seats. The kitchen light cast a warm glow over their little gathering. Eli stabbed at his spaghetti with clumsy determination, while Sophie carefully twisted her fork, just as Ellie had shown her. Something about this simple moment, sharing a meal with these 2 precious children, made Ellie's heart swell. "Is it good?" she asked, watching their faces for approval. Both nodded enthusiastically, sauce already smeared around their mouths. For the first time since finding them, Ellie felt truly at peace. This was right. This was home. After dinner, she helped them wash up and change into pajamas she'd bought at the discount store. They weren't fancy, but they were clean and warm. Sophie's had little stars on them, while Eli's were decorated with trucks. "Story?" Sophie asked hopefully, her small hand clutching Ellie's. "Of course," Ellie replied, leading them to the makeshift bed she'd created on the pull-out couch. She tucked them in, making sure they were snug under the blankets. The twins curled up close to each other, their eyes heavy with sleep but fixed on her face as she read from a children's book she'd found on her bookshelf. As their eyelids began to droop, Ellie set the book aside. She leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to each of their foreheads. Sophie's hair smelled like the baby shampoo from their bath earlier, and Eli's cheek was warm against her hand. "Everything's going to be okay," she whispered, more to herself than to them. "I promise." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning and uncertainty. But as she watched their peaceful, sleeping faces, she knew she would do whatever it took to keep that promise. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the playground as Ellie guided the twins toward their favorite park. Sophie skipped ahead, her pigtails bouncing with each step, while Eli clutched Ellie's hand tightly. The familiar stretch of grass and colorful play equipment usually brought a smile to Ellie's face, but today something felt off. That's when she noticed him. A man in a dark jacket stood across the street, partially hidden behind a tree. He wasn't doing anything particularly suspicious, just standing there, watching. but there was something about his stance, the way his eyes followed their every move, that made Ellie's skin crawl. "Come on, sweeties," Ellie said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Let's go sit on our special bench." She steered the children towards their usual spot, positioning herself so she could keep an eye on the stranger while pretending to watch the twins play. Sophie climbed onto the bench beside Ellie, pulling out her favorite stuffed rabbit from her little backpack. Eli sat on Ellie's other side, pressing close to her as if sensing her unease. The morning had started so normally. Breakfast, getting dressed, Sophie insisting on wearing her purple socks. Now Ellie's heart was racing as she watched the man cross the street. He walked with purpose, his boots heavy on the pavement. As he got closer, Ellie could see the hard lines around his mouth, the calculating look in his eyes. She wrapped her arms protectively around the twins, who were oblivious to the tension in the air. "Beautiful morning," the man said, stopping a few feet from their bench. His voice was gruff, like sandpaper on wood. "These your kids?" Ellie swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "They're my sister's children," she lied, the words tasting bitter in her mouth. "I'm watching them while she's at work." The man's eyes narrowed slightly, studying the twins' faces. "That so?" he drawled. "Funny, they look just like someone I used to know." Sophie looked up from her stuffed rabbit, her innocent eyes taking in the stranger. Ellie's hands trembled as she smoothed the little girl's hair. "Like I said, they're my sister's kids. Now, if you'll excuse us, we need to be heading home." The man didn't move immediately. He stood there, his presence like a dark cloud over their sunny morning. Finally, he gave a slight nod and turned away, his leather jacket creaking as he walked. Ellie watched him until he disappeared around the corner, her heart still pounding in her chest. The playground suddenly felt exposed, dangerous. The swings creaked in the breeze, and the cheerful chatter of other children seemed distant and unreal. Ellie gathered the twins close, breathing in their sweet, innocent scent, the smell of baby shampoo and graham crackers. "Time to go home, loves," she whispered, helping them gather their things. Sophie whined a little, disappointed their park visit was cut short, but Eli seemed to understand something was wrong. He held Ellie's hand extra tight as they walked back to her car. As Ellie buckled them into their car seats, her hands shaking slightly, she knew the gang was closing in. They were watching, waiting, getting bolder with each passing day. The safe little bubble she'd created for the twins was starting to crack, and she could feel time slipping through her fingers like sand. Looking in the rearview mirror at their precious faces, Ellie felt her chest tighten. The twins had become her whole world in such a short time, and she couldn't bear the thought of losing them. But the man at the park was a clear message. They weren't safe anymore. Something had to change. And soon. Ellie pushed the shopping cart down the cereal aisle, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for a box of Cheerios. Sophie sat in the cart's seat, playing with a small stuffed bunny, while Eli walked beside them, his tiny hand gripping the metal frame. "Can we get the one with chocolate?" Eli asked, pointing at a brightly colored box. "Not today, sweetie," Ellie said softly, forcing a smile. "Let's stick to the healthy stuff." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as they made their way through the store. Ellie kept glancing over her shoulder, an uneasy feeling creeping up her spine. The store wasn't very crowded, just a few elderly shoppers and a tired-looking mom with 3 kids. As they turned into the dairy section, 2 men in leather jackets appeared at the end of the aisle. They were tall and muscular, with hard eyes that locked onto Ellie immediately. Her heart started racing as they walked toward her, their boots making heavy sounds against the linoleum floor. "Hey there," one of them said, his voice low and gravelly. We need to talk about Jake. Ellie's throat went dry. She pulled the cart closer, positioning herself between the men and the children. I'm sorry, I don't know who that is. The second man stepped forward, a fake smile plastered on his face. Come on now, don't play dumb. The guy who gave you those kids? He nodded toward the twins. We know you were there that night. Sophie started to whimper, picking up on the tension. Eli pressed himself against Ellie's leg, hiding behind her. I really don't know what you're talking about, Ellie said, trying to keep her voice steady. These are my sister's children. I'm just watching them for a few days. The first man's smile disappeared. He moved closer, towering over her. Listen carefully. We know you're lying, and we don't like liars. Jake's got something that belongs to us, and those kids are our ticket to getting it back. You're making a mistake, Ellie insisted, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Please, just leave us alone. The second man grabbed the cart, holding it in place. You're going to regret not cooperating with us. That's not a threat. It's a promise. Ellie felt her legs go weak, but she stood her ground. I need to get these children home. This isn't over, the first man growled, finally stepping back. Not by a long shot. As soon as they moved away, Ellie abandoned the cart and scooped up both children. She hurried toward the exit, not caring about the groceries or the stares from other customers. Her only thought was getting the twins to safety. In the parking lot, her hands shook so badly she could barely get the key into the car door. She secured the twins in their car seats as quickly as she could, constantly looking over her shoulder. The men hadn't followed them outside, but she could feel their eyes on her through the store windows. Ellie got behind the wheel and started the engine. Her whole body was trembling as she pulled out of the parking lot. In the rearview mirror, she could see Sophie hugging her stuffed bunny tightly while Eli stared out the window, unusually quiet. The drive home was a blur. Ellie took random turns and doubled back several times, making sure no one was following them. Her knuckles were white from gripping the steering wheel so hard. Every red light felt like an eternity, every car behind them a potential threat. By the time they reached her apartment, Ellie's shirt was damp with sweat. She sat in the parked car, trying to catch her breath, knowing that the men's threat wasn't empty. They would be back. Ellie's hands trembled as she stuffed clothes and essentials into a worn duffel bag. Sophie sat on the floor nearby, hugging her teddy bear while Eli played with his toy cars. The afternoon sun filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows across the room. Every few seconds, Ellie glanced at the window, checking for unfamiliar faces. A sharp knock at the door made her jump. The twins looked up, startled by her reaction. Ellie's heart pounded against her ribs as she crept toward the door. Taking a deep breath, she peered through the peephole. It's Carmen, a familiar voice called from the other side. We need to talk. Ellie hesitated, then opened the door just enough to see Carmen's face. The woman wore her usual leather jacket, but her expression was different today. Softer, more worried. Can I come in? Carmen asked, glancing over her shoulder. Ellie stepped aside, letting her enter. The twins watched curiously as Carmen walked into the living room. She looked different in the daylight, less intimidating somehow. You're packing, Carmen observed, nodding at the half-filled bag. Good. You need to leave. What's happening? Ellie asked, moving closer to the twins. Carmen ran a hand through her dark hair. The gang's planning something big. I don't know all the details, but it's not good. They're desperate to find Jake's kids before he remembers anything. Jake? Ellie's voice caught. The twins' father? He's alive? Yeah, but he's not doing great. The doctors say he might have temporary memory loss from the trauma. He doesn't remember what happened that night. Carmen's eyes settled on the twins. Which is exactly why you need to get out of here. Once Jake remembers, things will get ugly fast. Ellie sat down heavily on the couch. Sophie climbed into her lap, sensing her distress. I don't understand. Why are they so afraid of what he might remember? Jake was going to testify against the gang. He knew too much, saw too much. They tried to kill him for it. Carmen's voice dropped lower. These kids are all they have left to control him. If he wakes up and remembers everything, the only way they can keep him quiet is through them. The weight of Carmen's words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Eli abandoned his cars and came to stand beside Ellie, pressing against her leg. I can help you leave the city, Carmen said, pulling out a set of keys. I have a safe house about 3 hours north. It's off the grid, somewhere they'd never look. Ellie wrapped her arms around both children, feeling their warmth, their trust in her. The thought of running scared her, but the thought of staying terrified her even more. Why are you helping us? Ellie asked, studying Carmen's face. Carmen's tough exterior cracked slightly. Because I've seen what these people can do, and because... She paused, looking at the twins. Because Jake was right to want out. These kids deserve better than this life. Ellie looked around her small apartment, the only real home she'd known in years. The idea of leaving everything behind made her chest tight with anxiety. But as she held the twins closer, she knew staying might be the bigger risk. How long do we have? She asked. Not long. A day, maybe less. Carmen placed the keys on the coffee table. I know you want to protect them here, but sometimes running is the bravest thing you can do. The afternoon sun streamed through Ellie's living room window, casting warm patches of light on the worn carpet. 3-year-old Sophie sat cross-legged on the floor, carefully stacking wooden blocks into a wobbly tower. Her brother Eli lay on his stomach nearby, running a toy car back and forth across the carpet, making gentle vrooming sounds. Ellie watched them from her spot on the couch, a soft smile playing on her lips. The twins had been with her for 2 weeks now, and despite the constant worry gnawing at her insides, moments like these made her heart feel full. Sophie's golden curls caught the sunlight, reminding Ellie of a halo, while Eli's determined expression as he navigated his car through an imaginary road brought a warmth to her chest she'd never known before. Look, Ellie, Sophie called out, adding another block to her tower. It's tall like a castle. It sure is, sweetie, Ellie replied, leaning forward to admire the creation. You're getting really good at... The front door crashed open with a deafening bang that shook the walls. Sophie's tower tumbled down as she screamed in terror. 2 men in leather jackets burst into the room, their heavy boots thundering against the floor. Ellie recognized them immediately. They were the same ones who had threatened her at the grocery store. Time's up, the taller one growled, his eyes dark with menace. Hand over the kids! Ellie jumped to her feet, positioning herself between the men and the twins. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her voice came out steady and strong. Get out of my apartment, now! Don't make this harder than it needs to be, the second man said, taking a step closer. His leather jacket creaked as he moved, and Ellie could see a tattoo snaking up his neck. The kids come with us. Sophie began to cry, and Eli scrambled to his feet, clutching his sister's hand. Ellie felt their small bodies pressing against her legs, seeking protection. I said get out, Ellie shouted, her hands balling into fists. I've called the police. It was a lie, but she hoped it would buy them some time. The men exchanged glances, and the taller one laughed, a cold, harsh sound that made Ellie's skin crawl. No, you haven't. But that's a good idea. Let's see who they believe. A delivery girl playing house, or 2 concerned uncles? They moved forward in unison, spreading out to block any escape route to the front door. Ellie's mind raced, remembering the back door in her kitchen. It was their only chance. "Sophie, Eli," she whispered, never taking her eyes off the intruders. "Remember our special game? The one where we run super fast?" She felt their small heads nod against her legs. "When I say now, we're going to play it, okay?" The men were just feet away now, their hands outstretched to grab the children. Ellie's muscles tensed, ready to move. "Now!" she screamed, scooping up both twins in one fluid motion. She spun around and sprinted toward the kitchen, her feet barely touching the ground. The men shouted behind her, their heavy footsteps giving chase. Ellie burst through the kitchen, the twins clinging to her like koalas. She could hear the men's boots thundering closer, feel their presence bearing down on her. Her trembling hand found the back door handle, and she yanked it open with all her might. The cool afternoon air hit her face as she dashed out into the alley behind her building, the sounds of pursuit close behind. Ellie's hands trembled as she pulled into Marge's driveway. The small house, with its weathered blue paint and white trim, sat nestled among tall oak trees at the end of a quiet street. The twins had fallen asleep in the back seat during the drive, their little faces peaceful despite everything that had happened. "Come on, sweethearts," Ellie whispered, gently lifting Sophie while balancing Eli on her hip. The weight of both children made her arms ache, but she wouldn't let them go. Not now. Not after what had just happened at her apartment. Marge opened the door before Ellie could knock. The older woman's silver hair was tied back in a loose bun, and her kind eyes crinkled with concern. "Get in here, honey," she said, ushering them inside. "Quick now." The house smelled like fresh-baked cookies and lavender. It was exactly what Ellie remembered from her delivery routes, when Marge would always invite her in for tea during her breaks. The older woman had become something of a surrogate mother figure to her over the past year. "You can put them down in the spare room," Marge said, leading the way down a narrow hallway. "I already made up the bed." Ellie laid the twins on the floral bedspread, tucking them in gently. Sophie stirred but didn't wake, her tiny hand clutching her brother's sleeve. The sight made Ellie's heart squeeze painfully in her chest. Back in Marge's kitchen, Ellie slumped into a chair at the worn wooden table. Her whole body felt heavy with exhaustion. "I don't know what to do anymore," she admitted, her voice cracking. "Those men broke into my apartment. They were going to take the twins." Marge set a steaming mug of tea in front of her and sat down. "You're doing the right thing, protecting those babies," she said firmly. "Sometimes the right path isn't the easy one." "But for how long can I keep this up?" Ellie wrapped her hands around the warm mug, drawing comfort from its heat. "I'm just one person. I can't fight an entire gang. I can barely afford to take care of them." "You're stronger than you think." Marge reached across the table and patted Ellie's hand. "I've watched you work yourself to the bone making deliveries, never complaining, always with a smile. Those children need someone like you, someone who won't give up on them." Tears welled up in Ellie's eyes. "I love them," she whispered. "I've only known them for a short time, but I love them so much it hurts." "That's what being a mother feels like," Marge smiled softly. "It doesn't matter if they're yours by birth or by choice. The love is the same." A small sound from the hallway made them both turn. Eli stood there in his rumpled clothes, rubbing his eyes sleepily. "Ellie?" His voice wavered. Ellie was out of her chair in an instant, scooping him up into her arms. Sophie appeared behind him, and Ellie gathered her close too. She held them both tightly, breathing in their sweet, familiar scent. "It's okay," she murmured, rocking them gently. "We're safe here, I promise." She meant it with every fiber of her being, even though she wasn't sure how she would keep that promise. For now, in this moment, they were safe in Marge's house, and that would have to be enough. Marge's house sat on a quiet street lined with old oak trees, their branches creating a natural canopy that shielded the modest home from prying eyes. Inside, Ellie watched the twins play with a box of ancient toys Marge had dug out from her attic. Sophie clutched a worn teddy bear while Eli pushed around a wooden train that had seen better days. The past few days had been surprisingly peaceful. Marge's gentle presence and grandmother-like warmth helped ease some of Ellie's anxiety. The old woman moved slowly around her kitchen, always cooking something that filled the house with comforting aromas. But despite the calm atmosphere, Ellie couldn't shake the feeling that they were just hiding from the inevitable. "You're wearing a path in my carpet, dear," Marge said softly, watching Ellie pace back and forth. "Come sit down and have some tea." Ellie sank into the worn floral armchair, her eyes never leaving the twins. "I just don't know what to do next," she admitted. "We can't stay here forever." The evening light was fading when the phone rang, making Ellie jump. Marge answered it and quickly handed it to Ellie with a concerned look. "Hello?" Ellie's voice was barely above a whisper. "It's Carmen." The familiar voice on the other end was tense. "Listen carefully. Jake's awake. He's stable. The doctors say he'll make it." Ellie's heart skipped a beat. "The twins' father, he's really okay?" "Yes, but that's not all. The gang knows he's conscious and they're getting desperate. They're still looking for the kids, Ellie. They think if they find them, they can use them as leverage to keep Jake quiet." Ellie watched as Sophie helped her brother stack wooden blocks. The sight of their innocent faces made her chest tight with determination. "What are you suggesting?" "I can help you disappear," Carmen said. "I know people who can get you new identities, set you up somewhere far from here. The gang would never find you." The offer hung in the air like smoke. Ellie thought about it, really thought about it, running away, starting fresh, keeping the twins safe. But something about Carmen's offer felt wrong. Could she trust someone who was still connected to the gang? "How do I know this isn't a trap?" Ellie asked, her voice stronger now. Carmen sighed. "You don't. But I'm trying to make things right. Jake, he was more than just another gang member to me. What they did to him, what they're willing to do to his kids, it's wrong." Eli looked up from his blocks and smiled at Ellie, his father's eyes shining in his small face. In that moment, something shifted inside her. She thought about all the running they'd already done, all the fear and uncertainty. "No," Ellie said firmly into the phone. "I'm done running. These kids deserve better than spending their lives looking over their shoulders." "Ellie, don't be stupid. I'm going to fight for them," Ellie cut her off. "The gang needs to understand that they can't have these children. I won't let them use Eli and Sophie as pawns in their game." She hung up the phone, her hands steady for the first time in days. Across the room, the twins had abandoned their toys and were curled up together on Marge's old couch, their eyes heavy with sleep. Looking at them, Ellie knew she had made the right choice. No more running, no more hiding. The drive back to her apartment felt different this time. Ellie's hands were steady on the steering wheel, her jaw set with determination. In the rearview mirror, she could see Eli and Sophie sleeping peacefully in their car seats, their tiny chests rising and falling with each breath. The sight gave her strength. "We're going home," she whispered, more to herself than to the sleeping children. The apartment was exactly as they'd left it, the front door still showing marks from where the gang members had forced their way in. Ellie carried the twins inside, one in each arm, their warm bodies pressed against her chest. She settled them on the couch, tucking their favorite blanket around them. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the living room floor. Ellie knew they would come. She'd made sure word got back to the gang about her return. No more running, no more hiding. She was tired of being afraid. It didn't take long. The rumble of motorcycles broke the evening quiet. Ellie stood in the middle of her living room, her heart beating steady and strong. She heard heavy boots on the stairs, then down the hallway. The door burst open with a crash that made the twins stir but not wake. Rick stood in the doorway, his massive frame blocking the light from the hallway. 3 other gang members crowded behind him, their faces hard and mean. "Well, well," Rick sneered, taking a step into the apartment. "Look who decided to stop running." Ellie lifted her chin. "I'm not running anymore." Rick's eyes darted to the sleeping twins on the couch. "Those kids belong with us. Their father was one of ours." "Was," Ellie emphasized, taking a step forward. "And he chose to leave that life behind. For them." She gestured to Eli and Sophie. Rick's face darkened. "You don't know what you're talking about, little girl. Step aside." "No." The word came out stronger than Ellie expected. "They're not going anywhere with you." Rick moved closer, towering over her. His breath smelled like cigarettes and anger. "You really think you can stop us?" "I already have," Ellie said, her voice steady. "For days now, and I'll keep stopping you." Rick's hand shot out, grabbing her arm. "Last chance." The twins stirred on the couch, and Ellie felt her protective instinct surge. She yanked her arm free, staring Rick straight in the eyes. "You're not touching these children." Rick raised his hand, and Ellie braced herself. But before he could move, the apartment door flew open again. Everyone turned. There, leaning against the doorframe, stood the twins' father. His face was pale, and bandages were visible under his t-shirt, but his eyes burned with intensity. The gang members stumbled backward, their faces showing shock and disbelief. "Jake," Rick breathed, his voice barely a whisper. The twins' father, Jake, took a step into the room, his gaze never leaving Rick's face. He didn't need to say anything. His presence alone changed everything. Rick's hand dropped to his side, and the other gang members shifted uncomfortably. Ellie felt the energy in the room shift. She'd won, not through force or violence, but through determination and love. The twins slept on, unaware of the drama unfolding around them, safe under her protection, just as she'd promised. The silence in the room was deafening. Jake stood in the doorway, his tall frame casting a shadow across the floor. Despite his injuries, he carried himself with strength and determination. His leather jacket hung loosely on his shoulders, hiding the bandages underneath. His eyes, once hard and cold, now held a different kind of fire. "It's over, Rick," Jake said, his voice firm but weary. "I'm done with all of this. The violence, the threats, it ends here." Rick's face contorted with anger. "You can't just walk away, Jake. You know too much. And these kids are my children," Jake cut him off. "And this woman," he gestured to Ellie, who stood protectively in front of the twins. "She saved their lives. She kept them safe when I couldn't." The other gang members shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between Jake and Rick. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. "I've made my choice," Jake continued, taking a step forward. His movement was slightly stiff, evidence of his healing wounds, but his determination never wavered. "I'm testifying against the club, not because I want revenge, but because it's the right thing to do. My kids deserve better than this life." Rick's hand twitched near his jacket, but he thought better of it. Jake might have been injured, but everyone in the room knew his reputation. Even wounded, he wasn't someone to cross. "You're making a mistake," Rick growled, but his voice had lost its earlier confidence. "No," Jake replied quietly. "The mistake was letting things go this far. I should have walked away years ago." He looked at Eli and Sophie, who were watching the scene with wide eyes from behind Ellie. "But I'm walking away now." The gang members exchanged glances. The atmosphere in the room had shifted. What had started as an intimidation mission was crumbling before their eyes. They all knew Jake, knew what he was capable of, knew his word was good. If he said he was done, he meant it. Rick's shoulders slumped slightly, the fight draining from his posture. "The club won't forget this," he said, but the threat in his words rang hollow. "I'm counting on that," Jake responded. "Remember what happened here. Remember that I chose my children over the club, and remember that if anything happens to them, or to Ellie, you'll answer to me." The gang members began backing toward the door, their earlier bravado replaced by uncertainty. Rick was the last to leave, his face a mask of frustrated anger. The door closed behind them with a quiet click that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Ellie let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The twins, sensing the danger had passed, ran to her side. She wrapped her arms around them, feeling their small bodies trembling slightly. Looking at Eli and Sophie's faces, Ellie felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks: peace. The constant fear that had been her companion since that fateful night was finally lifting. The twins were safe. They were all safe. Jake watched them, his expression softening. The hardened biker who had been shot and left for dead was gone, replaced by a father who had found his way back to his children. The transformation was remarkable, and Ellie could see in his eyes that his redemption was genuine. The twins looked up at her, their faces bright with relief and trust. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, Ellie knew with certainty that they were truly free from the gang's grip. The autumn breeze rustled through the trees at Wilson Park, carrying with it the sweet scent of fallen leaves. Ellie sat on a worn wooden bench, watching Eli and Sophie chase each other around the playground. Their laughter echoed across the park, pure and carefree. Next to her, Jake leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his eyes fixed on his children. The past few weeks had changed everything. The fear and uncertainty that had gripped their lives had finally lifted, replaced by a sense of peace that felt almost foreign. Eli's curly hair bounced as he ran, and Sophie's pink dress twirled as she spun around the monkey bars. They were different children now, their eyes brighter, their smiles wider. "They're happy," Jake said, his voice soft but firm. He shifted on the bench, wincing slightly from his healing wounds. The leather jacket he wore couldn't quite hide the bandages underneath, but his face showed determination rather than pain. "I've never seen them like this before." Ellie nodded, her heart swelling as Sophie waved at her from the slide. "They deserve to be happy," she said. "They deserve to feel safe." Jake turned to face her, his weathered features softening. "You did that for them, Ellie. You gave them something I never could. A real home. Someone they could trust completely." He paused, clearing his throat. "When I was lying there that night, bleeding out on the sidewalk, I thought I was going to die. But then you showed up, and something told me you were different. Something told me you would protect them." "I didn't know what I was doing," Ellie admitted, watching as Eli helped his sister climb the ladder to the slide. "I just knew I couldn't leave them." "That's exactly why you were the right person," Jake said. "You didn't think about the danger or the cost. You just saw two kids who needed help, and you stepped up." He rubbed his hands together, a gesture that seemed more about grounding himself than warming up. "I've done a lot of things I'm not proud of, Ellie. But watching you with them, seeing how much they love you, it makes me want to be better." Eli came running over, his cheeks flushed from playing. "Mommy Ellie, watch me go down the big slide," he called out, tugging at her sleeve. Ellie's heart skipped a beat at the words, "Mommy Ellie." It wasn't the first time he'd called her. That, but each time felt special, like a gift she never expected to receive. She smiled at him, squeezing his small hand. "I'm watching, sweetie. Show me how brave you are." As Eli ran back to the playground, Jake said quietly, "They think of you as their mother, you know, and they're right too. You've been more of a parent to them in these few weeks than I've been their whole lives." Sophie joined her brother at the top of the slide, and they came down together, shrieking with delight. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, casting long shadows across the park. Ellie felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her, as if all the pieces of her life had finally clicked into place. "Come on," she said, standing up. "Let's head home before it gets dark." Jake nodded, calling the twins over. They gathered their things, and as they walked toward the park exit, Sophie slipped her tiny hand into Ellie's, while Eli held on to Jake's. They moved together as a unit, a family forged in the most unexpected circumstances. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Ellie's small front porch as she watched Eli and Sophie playing in the yard. The twins had grown so much in the past few months, not just in size, but in confidence too. Their laughter rang out clear and bright as they chased each other around the oak tree, their favorite game of tag in full swing. Ellie sank deeper into her worn wooden rocking chair, letting the gentle back and forth motion soothe her. Jake was out running errands, probably picking up groceries and stopping by the hardware store to get supplies for the treehouse he'd promised to build. It still amazed her how quickly their little family had come together, how natural it felt. Sophie's pigtails bounced as she ducked behind the tree, trying to escape her brother's reaching hands. "Can't catch me," she called out, her voice carrying the hint of a giggle. Eli, determined as ever, circled the tree with his arms outstretched. The peaceful moment wrapped around Ellie like a warm blanket. These quiet afternoons were precious. No threats, no looking over their shoulders, just the simple joy of watching children play. The memory of those first terrifying days seemed almost like a dream now, though the weight of what they'd been through still lingered. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, startling her from her thoughts. Carmen's name flashed across the screen. Ellie's heart skipped a beat. Old habits died hard, and calls from Carmen usually meant trouble. She answered, keeping her voice low so the kids wouldn't notice her tension. "Ellie?" Carmen's familiar raspy voice came through clear and strong. "I've got news." "What is it?" Ellie watched the twins, ready to call them inside if necessary. "It's over." Carmen's words were simple, but carried the weight of mountains. "The gang, they're done. Jake's testimony sealed it. The last holdouts either got arrested or scattered. Nobody's coming after you or the kids, anymore." Ellie's hand trembled slightly as she gripped the phone tighter. "You're sure?" "Completely sure. The FBI rounded up the last of them yesterday. I thought you should know. You can stop looking over your shoulder now." Eli had finally caught up to Sophie, and their delighted squeals filled the air as they tumbled onto the grass, both laughing so hard they could barely breathe. "Thank you, Carmen," Ellie said softly, "for everything." "You did good, kid. Those children are lucky to have you." There was a pause. Then Carmen added, "We all are." After they hung up, Ellie sat there for a long moment, letting the news sink in. The constant undercurrent of fear that had hummed beneath every happy moment, every peaceful day, finally began to dissolve. She watched Sophie help Eli up from the grass, the two of them already planning their next adventure. A smile spread across her face, slow and sweet like honey. They were safe. Really, truly safe. The life she'd built with Jake and the twins wasn't temporary anymore. It was permanent, solid, real. No more looking over her shoulder, no more contingency plans, no more quiet fears about what tomorrow might bring. The afternoon light turned golden, painting everything in warm hues. Sophie waved at her from the yard, her small face glowing with joy. "Mama Ellie, come play with us." Ellie's heart swelled at those words. Mama Ellie. It had started as a slip of the tongue months ago, but now it was who she was, who she would always be. The afternoon sun painted long shadows across the small yard as Ellie watched Eli and Sophie chase each other around the swing set. Their laughter, pure and innocent, filled the air with a joy she never thought possible just a few months ago. The grass needed cutting, and the fence could use a fresh coat of paint, but to Ellie, it was perfect. Their home. Sophie's pigtails bounced as she ran, her little pink shoes lighting up with each step. Eli, always the protective brother, made sure to let his sister catch him every now and then. They had grown so much since that fateful night when Ellie found them clutched in their father's arms. The screen door creaked behind her, and Jake's heavy boots thudded on the wooden porch. He settled into the chair next to her, his leather jacket replaced by a simple flannel shirt. The changes in him were more than just clothes deep. His eyes were softer now, his smile easier. "There's something else, aren't they?" Jake's voice was gentle as he watched his children play. The remnants of his injuries were barely visible now, just a slight stiffness when he moved. Ellie nodded, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "They're amazing. Sophie asked me this morning if she could paint her room purple." Jake chuckled. Then his expression grew more serious. "About that? I've been thinking. This house, this city, there are too many memories here. Too many people who know us. You want to move?" Ellie turned to face him, reading the determination in his eyes. "I found a place." Jake leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "It's a few hours north, near the mountains. 3 bedrooms, big backyard. The kind of place where kids can grow up safe." Ellie watched as Sophie helped Eli up after a tumble, dusting off his knees just like she had shown her. "Tell me more." "Small town, friendly people. Nobody knows about my past there. We could start fresh, all of us." Jake's voice held a note of hope she'd never heard before. "The kids could go to a good school, make friends. You could maybe open that daycare center you talked about." The idea settled in Ellie's chest like a warm blanket. A fresh start. No more looking over their shoulders, no more whispers about the ex-Hell's Angel and the delivery girl who saved his kids. "When?" she asked, already knowing her answer. "End of the month? The house is available, and I've got enough saved up for the down payment." Jake hesitated, then added, "But only if you're sure. You've given up so much already for us." Ellie stood up, calling out to the twins. "Eli, Sophie, come here for a minute." They came running, faces flushed from playing. Ellie knelt down, opening her arms wide, and they crashed into her embrace. She breathed in their familiar scent, a mixture of sunshine and the strawberry shampoo they loved. "I haven't given up anything," she said to Jake over their heads. "I've gained everything." Sophie squirmed in her arms. "Why are you squeezing so tight, Mommy?" The word still made Ellie's heart skip a beat. She hadn't asked for it. It had just slipped out one day from Sophie's lips, and it felt right, natural, like it had always been meant to be. "Because I love you both so much," Ellie said, kissing their foreheads. "How would you like to live in a new house, near the mountains?" Eli's eyes went wide. "Will there be trees to climb?" "Lots of trees," Jake promised, joining them in their group hug. "And room for a puppy, maybe." The twins squealed with delight, and Ellie held them tighter. This was her family now. Not perfect, not conventional, but bound together by something stronger than blood. Choice, love, and the courage to begin again. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the winding country road as Ellie sat in the passenger seat of Jake's pickup truck. Her hands fidgeted in her lap, while the twins dozed in their car seats behind them. The familiar buildings of the city had given way to rolling hills and farmland, and with each passing mile, Ellie's nerves grew stronger. "They're going to love you," Jake said softly, reaching over to squeeze her hand. His touch was gentle, so different from the tough exterior he'd worn when they first met. "Just like I do." Ellie's heart skipped a beat at his words. She watched as Sophie stirred in her sleep, clutching the stuffed rabbit they'd bought her last week. Eli had his face pressed against the window, leaving tiny, foggy marks from his breath. The truck turned onto a gravel driveway that led to a 2-story farmhouse painted a cheerful yellow. Flower boxes hung from every window, bursting with colorful blooms. It wasn't at all what Ellie had expected from the parents of a former Hell's Angel. As they pulled up, the front door flew open. An older couple emerged onto the wraparound porch, Jake's parents. His mother wore a floral apron and had the same kind eyes as her son, while his father stood tall and proud, his silver hair catching the sunlight. "They're here!" Jake's mother called out, already making her way down the porch steps. The twins stirred at the commotion. "Are we there?" Eli asked, rubbing his eyes. "We sure are, buddy," Jake answered, helping them out of their car seats. Sophie clung to Ellie's leg at first, shy in the face of new people, but Jake's mother knew exactly what to do. She knelt down to the little girl's level, her smile warm and inviting. "Hello, sweetheart," she said softly. "I'm your Grandma Rose. Would you like to see the cookies I just baked?" Sophie's eyes widened, and she looked up at Ellie for permission. Ellie nodded encouragingly, and Sophie took a tentative step forward. "Chocolate chip?" she asked in her tiny voice. "With extra chocolate chips?" Grandma Rose winked. And just like that, the ice was broken. Eli was already investigating the tractor parked near the barn with Jake's father, who introduced himself as Frank. Their matching grins showed they were already partners in crime. Inside the farmhouse, the aroma of fresh-baked cookies and pot roast filled the air. Family photos lined the walls, Jake as a little boy, riding horses and playing baseball. There were empty frames, too, waiting to be filled with new memories. "We've been so excited to meet you all," Rose said, pulling Ellie into an unexpected hug. "When Jake told us about you, about how you saved our grandchildren." Her voice cracked with emotion. "You're family now, dear. You belong here." Ellie felt tears prick at her eyes as Rose's words washed over her. All her life, she'd felt like an outsider, someone who didn't quite fit anywhere. But here, in this warm kitchen with children's laughter floating in from the yard, something clicked into place. Sophie came running back in, her face smudged with chocolate, and threw herself into Ellie's arms. "Mama, Grandma says we can help make dinner," she exclaimed, her earlier shyness forgotten. Ellie caught Jake watching them from the doorway, his eyes soft with love. Rose busied herself getting aprons for the girls, while Frank's deep laugh mingled with Eli's squeals from outside. Holding Sophie close, Ellie breathed in the scent of chocolate and home-cooked meals, of family and belonging. This was what she'd been searching for all along. Not just a place to stay, but a place to belong. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the driveway as Ellie and Jake unloaded the last few boxes from their rental truck. The modest 2-story house wasn't fancy, but with its white picket fence and small front yard, it represented everything Ellie had ever dreamed of: safety, stability, and a real home. "Mommy, look at my room!" Sophie's excited voice rang through the house as she bounded down the stairs, her dark curls bouncing with each step. "It's so big!" Eli wasn't far behind his sister, his eyes wide with wonder. "Can we paint the walls blue, please?" Jake chuckled, setting down a heavy box marked kitchen on the counter. "Let's get settled in first, buddy." Ellie watched as the twins raced back upstairs, their footsteps thundering above. The sound of their happiness made her heart swell. Just 6 months ago, she'd been a lonely delivery driver. And now here she was, standing in their new home with 2 beautiful children and a man who'd changed his entire life to be the father they deserved. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Through the window, she could see a woman in her 50s holding what looked like a casserole dish. Jake gave her a reassuring nod as she went to answer it. "Welcome to the neighborhood." The woman's warm smile immediately put Ellie at ease. "I'm Martha from next door. I brought you some lasagna. Moving day is always exhausting." Before Ellie could properly thank her, 2 more neighbors appeared. Tom and Susan from across the street came bearing fresh-baked cookies and offers to help unpack. The kindness in their eyes showed no judgment, no questions about their past, just genuine warmth and welcome. "The kids in the house down the block are about your twins' age," Susan mentioned, helping Ellie unpack some dishes. "They've been excited all week knowing new friends were moving in." The twins, hearing mention of other children, peeked their heads around the corner shyly. Martha waved at them, and Sophie giggled, hiding behind her brother. As the afternoon wore on, more neighbors stopped by. Each one brought something: food, household supplies, or simply friendly conversation. No one seemed fazed by Jake's tattoos or asked probing questions about their past. They were accepted, just as they were. "This is really happening?" Ellie whispered to Jake as they watched Eli and Sophie playing with a welcome basket of toys from one of the neighbors. "We're really home." Jake squeezed her hand, his eyes soft with emotion. "You made this possible, Ellie. You gave us all a second chance." As evening settled in, Ellie helped the twins get ready for bed in their new rooms. Sophie insisted on keeping her fairy nightlight plugged in, while Eli arranged his stuffed animals just so. The routine felt natural now, as if she'd been doing it her whole life. "Story time?" Sophie asked hopefully, clutching her favorite book. "Of course, sweetie." Ellie sat on the edge of Sophie's bed, with Eli curled up next to his sister. As she read, the peaceful quiet of their new neighborhood wrapped around them like a warm blanket. After the story, Ellie tucked them in, kissing each child on the forehead. "Sweet dreams, my loves." "I love you, Mommy," Sophie mumbled sleepily. "Love you," Eli echoed, already half asleep. Standing in the doorway, watching their peaceful faces in the soft glow of the nightlight, Ellie felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. This was what home felt like. This was what family meant. In this quiet moment, all the struggles and fears of the past months faded away, replaced by something beautiful and permanent: love. Ellie sat on the front porch of their new house, watching the sunset paint the sky in soft shades of pink and orange. The gentle breeze carried the sweet scent of the flowering jasmine she'd planted last weekend. Inside, she could hear the twins laughing as they played with their toys. 6 months had passed since that fateful night when she found Jake bleeding on the sidewalk. Sometimes it felt like a lifetime ago, and other times, the memory was so fresh it made her heart race. She wrapped her arms around herself, remembering how scared she'd been, not just for herself, but for those 2 innocent children who needed someone to protect them. The screen door creaked open, and Jake stepped out, carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee. He handed one to Ellie and settled into the chair beside her. The afternoon light caught the silver in his beard, making him look softer than the tough biker she'd first met. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, his voice gentle. Ellie took a sip of coffee and smiled. "Just thinking about how different everything is now. A year ago, I was just a delivery girl, living paycheck to paycheck, feeling so alone." She paused, listening to Sophie's giggles floating through the open window. "Now look at us." Jake nodded, understanding in his eyes. He'd changed too. Gone were the leather jacket and the hardened exterior. He'd traded them for dad jeans and reading glasses, though his arms still carried the tattoos that told stories of his past life. "I never thought I'd have this," Ellie continued, her voice thick with emotion. "A real family, a home, people who count on me, who love me." She turned to face Jake, her eyes serious. "I need you to know something." Jake set his coffee down, giving her his full attention. The man who had once been feared by many now looked at her with such tenderness it made her heart ache. "I promise you, Jake," Ellie said firmly, "I will always be here for them, for Eli and Sophie. No matter what happens, they'll always have me in their corner." She swallowed hard, remembering all the times she'd felt abandoned in her own childhood. "I won't ever let them feel alone or unwanted. They're my kids too now, and that's forever." Jake reached over and took her hand, his larger one engulfing hers. "I know, Ellie. You've proven that 100 times over. You saved them. Saved all of us, really." The sound of small feet pattering across hardwood floors interrupted their moment. "Daddy, Ellie, we're hungry." Eli called from inside. "Coming, sweetie," Ellie called back, standing up and brushing off her jeans. Jake followed her into the house, where the twins were already sitting at the kitchen table, their homework pushed aside. Sophie immediately ran to Ellie, wrapping her arms around her waist. "Can we have spaghetti, please?" "Sure can, princess," Ellie replied, running her fingers through Sophie's dark curls. They moved around the kitchen together, Jake chopping vegetables while Ellie prepared the sauce. The twins set the table, proudly placing each fork and napkin with careful precision. It was their nightly routine now, something that had become as natural as breathing. When they finally sat down to eat, Ellie looked around at her family, Jake telling a silly joke, Eli trying not to laugh with his mouth full, Sophie carefully twirling her spaghetti just like Ellie had taught her. The kitchen was warm and bright, filled with the kind of love she'd always dreamed of but never thought she'd find. The late afternoon sun streamed through the windows of their new home as Ellie and Jake worked side by side, assembling a bookshelf for the twins' reading corner. Sawdust sparkled in the golden light, and the fresh scent of pine filled the air. Ellie held the wooden panels steady, while Jake carefully screwed them together. "Hand me that Phillips head," Jake asked, wiping sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. His leather jacket had long since been replaced by a plain white t-shirt, and his once intimidating tattoos now seemed like part of a different life altogether. Ellie reached into the toolbox and passed him the screwdriver. "You know, a few months ago I couldn't tell the difference between a Phillips and a flathead," she said with a laugh. "Now look at us, building furniture like pros." "We've both learned a lot," Jake replied, his voice soft and thoughtful. Through the open door, they could hear Eli and Sophie playing in their new backyard, their gleeful shrieks mixing with the chirping of birds. As they worked together, Ellie found herself stealing glances at Jake. His hands, once known for violence, now moved with gentle precision as he carefully aligned the shelf's corners. The man who had once struck fear into others was now spending his Saturday afternoon building a bookshelf for his children's stories. "Remember that first night?" Ellie asked, holding a board steady. "When I found you on the street?" Jake paused, his expression growing serious. "Every day. I think about how different things could have been if you hadn't stopped." "I was so scared," Ellie admitted, running her hand along the smooth wood. "Not just of the situation, but of taking on such a huge responsibility. I didn't think I was strong enough." Jake set down his screwdriver and looked at her directly. "But you were. Stronger than anyone I've ever known." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythmic sound of the screwdriver punctuated by the occasional instruction or question. Ellie felt the familiar warmth in her chest as she watched Jake measure twice before making each cut, his attention to detail showing his commitment to creating something perfect for their children. "Almost done?" Jake said, standing back to survey their work. "Just needs the last shelf." As they fitted the final piece into place, Ellie felt a surge of pride, not just in the bookshelf they'd built together, but in everything they'd built. A home, a family, a future. She'd grown from a lonely delivery girl into someone who could face down danger, protect those she loved, and build a life filled with purpose. The sound of small feet thundering down the hallway made them both turn. Eli and Sophie burst into the room, their faces flushed from playing outside. "Is it done?" Sophie asked, bouncing on her toes. "Can we put our books on it now?" "Just about, sweetheart," Jake answered, tightening the last screw. "Why don't we all get cleaned up for dinner first?" The kitchen soon filled with the warmth of home-cooked food and family chatter. Ellie set the table while Jake helped the twins wash their hands. The simple routine felt like a miracle after everything they'd been through. As they settled around the table, Ellie looked at the faces of her family. Jake, no longer the hardened biker, but a devoted father, and the twins, happy and secure in their love. They joined hands around the table, a tradition they'd started in their new home. The gesture was simple, but meaningful, a physical reminder of their connection to each other. The evening air was crisp and gentle as Ellie and Jake strolled down their quiet suburban street. Their fingers were intertwined, and the setting sun painted the sky in soft shades of pink and orange. The peaceful atmosphere was a stark contrast to the chaos that had brought them together just months ago. "Can you believe it's been 6 months?" Ellie asked, squeezing Jake's hand. She watched as 2 kids rode their bikes past them, their laughter reminding her of Eli and Sophie, who were having a play date at a neighbor's house. Jake's thumb brushed across her knuckles. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday when you found me on that street." His voice was gruff but tender. The scars from his gunshot wounds had healed, leaving only faint marks as reminders of that fateful night. They passed by neat houses with well-kept lawns, so different from the rough neighborhood where everything had started. Here, children played freely in their yards, and neighbors waved friendly greetings as they walked by. It was the kind of place Ellie had always dreamed of, but never thought she'd call home. "Remember how terrified I was?" Ellie said, shaking her head at the memory. "A delivery girl suddenly responsible for 2 toddlers. I barely knew how to change a diaper." Jake chuckled, the sound warm and genuine. "You figured it out pretty quick. You're a natural mother, Ellie. Those kids adore you." They stopped at the small park at the end of their street. The same park where Ellie had once hidden from gang members, now transformed into a place of joy where she often brought the twins to play. The swing set creaked gently in the breeze, and the setting sun cast long shadows across the grass. "I never thought I'd have this," Ellie admitted, leaning against Jake's shoulder. "A family, a home, a purpose. That night when I found you and the twins, I was just trying to survive each day, making deliveries and barely getting by." Jake wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "You saved us all that night. Not just the twins, but me too. You showed me there was another way to live." Ellie thought about how far they'd come. The gang was gone, disbanded after Jake's testimony. Carmen had moved away to start fresh, occasionally sending postcards to let them know she was doing well. The threats and fear that had once consumed their lives had faded into memory. Their new home was filled with children's laughter instead of worry. The twins were thriving, growing more confident and happy each day. Sophie had started taking dance classes, while Eli was showing a talent for drawing. Their refrigerator was covered with his colorful artwork. "We should head back," Jake said, checking his watch. "The kids will be home soon." As they walked back, Ellie noticed the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. She remembered nights spent lying awake, wondering if she'd made the right choice in keeping the twins. Now, she couldn't imagine her life without them. They reached their house, a modest but welcoming two-story with a small garden Ellie had planted. Through the window, she could see the twins' artwork displayed proudly on the walls, their toys scattered across the living room floor. It wasn't perfect, but it was home. "I love our life," Ellie said softly, pausing at the front door. She looked up at Jake, seeing in his eyes the same contentment she felt in her heart. Before Jake could respond, they heard excited voices approaching. The twins were running up the sidewalk, their faces bright with joy as they rushed toward their parents. Ellie's heart swelled with love as she watched them, knowing that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected moments. The evening air was cool and gentle as Ellie, Jake, and the twins sat together on their new front porch. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, casting long shadows across their peaceful suburban street. Sophie sat in Ellie's lap, while Eli leaned against Jake's strong shoulder, both children content and peaceful. "Look at that beautiful sunset," Ellie said softly, running her fingers through Sophie's hair. The little girl pointed excitedly at a flock of birds flying overhead, their silhouettes dark against the colorful sky. Jake reached over and took Ellie's free hand, his touch gentle despite his calloused fingers. "Never thought I'd have moments like this," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "Sitting here with my family watching the sun go down, it's more than I deserve." "You've changed," Ellie reminded him, squeezing his hand. "We all have." She looked down at Sophie, who was now playing with the hem of her dress, and then at Eli, who had dozed off against his father's side. Jake shifted carefully, trying not to wake his son. "I've been thinking about their future," he said. "What we want to teach them, what kind of life we want them to have." "Me too," Ellie nodded. "I want them to know love and kindness, to understand that no matter where you come from, you can choose to be better." "Like their mama showed them," Jake said with a warm smile. "You chose to help us when most people would have walked away. That's the kind of courage I want them to have." Ellie blushed at his words. "And like their daddy, who was brave enough to change his whole life for them," she added. "We'll teach them that family isn't just about blood, it's about love and choices." The sun dipped lower on the horizon, and Sophie squirmed in Ellie's lap, eager to play in the yard before darkness fell completely. "Can I go play, Mama?" she asked, her eyes bright with hope. "Just for a few minutes, sweetie," Ellie said, helping her down from the porch. The movement woke Eli, who rubbed his eyes and immediately perked up at the sight of his sister heading for the yard. "Me too," he called out, scrambling down from the porch to join his sister. Jake and Ellie watched as the twins chased each other across the grass, their laughter floating back to the porch like music. The streetlights began to flicker on, one by one, creating a gentle glow around their little piece of paradise. "We'll teach them to be strong," Jake said, wrapping an arm around Ellie's shoulders. "But also gentle. To stand up for what's right, like you did. And to believe in second chances," Ellie added, leaning into his embrace. "To know that love can change everything." The twins ran circles around the yard, playing an imaginary game that only they understood. Their joy was infectious, and Ellie couldn't help but smile as she watched them. These were her children now, in every way that mattered. And Jake was her partner, her rock, the man who had fought his way back from darkness to build this beautiful life with her. Ellie felt a profound sense of contentment wash over her as she sat there on the porch, wrapped in Jake's embrace, watching their children play in the dying light of day. The troubles of their past seemed distant now, like a storm that had finally passed, leaving behind a world washed clean and new. A gentle breeze rustled through the trees as the twins continued their game, their silhouettes dancing in the twilight. Ellie's smile grew wider, her heart full of love for her unexpected, perfect family. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.